B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, News and Comment. It's Thursday, June 29th, 2017. The Republicans, they persist in their efforts to slay the Affordable Care Act. And now it's devolved to trying to put lipstick on a shark and see if they can get the nominally moderate Republicans, along with the hardcore, we must destroy Obamacare in every aspect. They're trying to align those two rather conflicting groups. And it sure is ugly. And the Washington Post today actually reduced it to the proper elements here. It becomes a philosophical question. How far will the Republicans go as a death panel, serving up death and misery to millions of middle-income and low-income Americans so that they can give a tax cut that isn't needed to the wealthiest Americans? Now, in the negotiations, it appears that the immediate tax cut promised by the House version of the bill and the early drafts of the Senate version, the tax on incomes, passive incomes over $250,000 that helped fund the subsidies, well, it appears that some people are recommending that that be kept in place. This, of course, infuriates the hardline individuals who just want to decimate Obamacare, and they don't care what happens to the people. And this conversation is so detached that it is really painful to watch it go by. And last night, I caught part of the PBS NewsHour as Senator John Thune, Republican from Iowa, was interviewed, and he didn't talk about cutting the Medicaid rolls and denying coverage to, the 64% of nursing home patients who rely on Medicaid. No, he has this weird conversation about dialing things up and dialing things down. Take a listen.
What is the bigger challenge, Senator? Is it appealing to the moderates who believe that the cuts in Medicaid and other parts of the bill are too hard on those of lower income? Or is it the more conservative members who want a bigger repeal of Obamacare?
It's kind of a combination. And it's really, there are some things, Judy, in this process that you can dial back and forth. And we've been trying to turn those dials as much as we can to bring people on board. But we do have the more conservative members in our conference who have specific things that they want to see addressed in this bill. And then we've got the more moderate members who, as you mentioned, are concerned about Medicaid and trying to put the final touches on that.
Well, let me pick up on the...
So it's about dialing things up and dialing things down. But what does that mean? Behind the euphemism is a series of perverse calculations about, what is the comfort level for a majority of the Republican senators, or virtually all of them, because they need all except 2 of their caucus in order to get this crap through. But what is the calculation? What is the tolerance of the American voter, the Republican voter even, for how many millions of people will be denied access to health insurance and health care in the future? They're not even talking about the claims that they're going to lower premiums. They don't even pretend that they're going to improve coverage options. They are slashing and burning. And there are real people who are impacted by this. And for example, there is this bizarre conversation going on. There's enough money left over, even from the Senate bill, to slush around $200 billion. And so Rob Portman, senator from Ohio, is holding out for more money for opioid treatment. Now, I support expanded services to help rehabilitate people who get hooked on OxyContin and its related drugs. I'd like to see some accountability for the drug companies, the drug pushers, who have gotten so many millions of Americans addicted to this stuff. But the idea that we can carve out special funding for opioid addiction because it hammers red states is absurd. The money shouldn't be limited to opioid. It should be for broad-based drug treatment and rehabilitation. And it should be tied to an end to the draconian drug laws that Jeff Sessions wants to ramp up again, the minimum mandatory sentences and the idea that you can imprison people and end drug abuse. Another issue relates to the tax element that I mentioned that's in the Affordable Care Act. It's a 3.8% tax that applies to individuals making over $200,000 a year, and most of their income comes from dividends or other passive sources. And it appears that Bob Corker, the Tennessee senator, is working to retain that. But then you get Pat Toomey from Pennsylvania. He came out of the so-called Club for Growth, and he wants to take a club to that tax because his rich cronies don't like to pay taxes. And they don't care that people will suffer or that people will die as a result of their greed and their larceny. Then when it comes to the Medicaid cuts, what is the magic number that's enough to fund tax cuts that the Republicans want, but that doesn't kill too many people? I mean, this is such an amoral conversation to have. And yet it's cloaked in all this legislative talk and this Washington speak. And the bottom line is these Republicans are forming the death panels that Sarah Palin claimed were going to be set up under Obamacare. And these are massive death panels who are deciding the fate of millions of Americans in the most cold and cynical manner that I've seen in my lifetime. We've got numbers here. The current plan, and it is evolving, obviously, but the last scoring of the Senate bill showed that the uninsured population in California would jump from 9 to 21% over the next 5 years if this bill is made into law. About 4.3 million more Californians would go without insurance under the GOP plan. At the same time, Planned Parenthood services would be decimated, a 73% cut to its operating budget in California if the Republican health care bill becomes law. These are real impacts. Sexually transmitted diseases will spike. We will lack diagnoses of breast cancer and ovarian cancer and other situations that apply primarily to women. And that's not to mention the unwanted pregnancies that may result from a cutback in access to simple contraception. So these represent massive, deep impacts. And I believe the media is not doing a very good job. Sure, there are these explainers where, we'll get a profile of one of the individuals who will be negatively impacted by this. But I don't think that the deep implications are really being communicated to the American people. And let me underscore one more time that the employer mandate, the requirement that your employer provides subsidized health insurance for you if you're a full-time worker, that goes away in the House and Senate versions to date. And I think that is hugely alarming, and it is underplayed in almost every report that even bothers to mention that. They talk about the Republican desire to end the individual mandate that was so unpopular under Obamacare, but they soft pedal the fact that they are freeing employers from the obligation to provide health insurance on a subsidized basis. It used to be fully paid by the employer to full-time workers. That affects a huge portion of the workforce. It's 70-80%. And I don't think that many people understand that that's what is included in these legislative packages. In twin developments that are bad for tourism, bad for trade, and bad for international trust, Trumpco has announced the travel ban will go into effect after being mostly approved by the Supreme Court. They picked 8 p.m. Eastern Time today for the witching hour. And yesterday, General John Kelly, the head of Homeland Security, announced some new procedures in airline security theater.
I used to fly with my clothes on till the airline clothing ban. We went from scanning to banning. One airline had tanning, and this was the ad they ran. Fly safe, fly naked, no weapons to find. You're safer with nothing on. Naked Airlines.
That's Loose Bruce Kerr. U.S. officials are requiring enhanced screening of personal electronic devices, passengers, and explosive detection for the roughly 2,000 commercial flights arriving daily in the United States. Now, note that these are only inbound flights. This is Fortress America saying, hey, there aren't any real threats domestically, and we don't pose a threat. None of our citizens or people flying out of the United States from other countries pose a threat to the rest of the world. This is so self-centered and short-sighted. It applies to the 2,000 commercial flights arriving every day from 105 countries. And the idea is that everyone is a possible terrorist, everyone is a suspect, unless you're an American citizen. And the airlines are relieved because there had been talk of a complete ban on laptops inside the cabin. You could put them in your checked baggage and detonate the bomb from the comfort of your seat, but you couldn't blow up the plane with a laptop with explosives inside the cabin. Doesn't make much sense to me. But the airlines were apoplectic because, they get huge profits from business class. And on overseas flights from those upgrades, Economy Plus and 2 inches of extra leg room for an extra $500. And so they were very concerned that the most profitable sector of passengers, the business traveler, would be impacted by that and might make other plans, might use that laptop to hold a teleconference or a video conference instead of flying for a face-to-face meeting. And I credit the Washington Post and Philip Bump for a story today headlined, "The travel ban going into effect would have saved 0 lives from terrorist attacks in the last 20 years." Now, one of the issues here is that the Supreme Court, as I mentioned a couple of days ago, in its ruling upholding much of the travel ban, introduced a new definition: somebody with a bona fide connection to the United States. And as I mentioned, they didn't cite an existing definition in law. They offered a few examples to try to guide, but now we have bureaucrats at the State Department issuing guidelines, and these are likely to produce lawsuits and a lot of heartbreak because they've already excluded grandparents, grandchildren, aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, cousins, brothers and sisters-in-law, but sons and daughters-in-law are considered, qualified to come into the country. They will not be denied visas. Now, this becomes unworkable because everybody's got a story, and my sister-in-law is sick, and I want to go see her, and this is just inhuman and inhumane. But as to this, these new standards, let me just cite a couple of examples for you. In August of 97, 2 men with Jordanian passports arrested in New York City before they could bomb public transit. Would the ban have prevented this? No. Jordan isn't on the list. 99, a man from Algeria arrested after entering the United States in Washington State. His car is loaded with explosives. He planned to attack LAX. Would the ban have prevented this? No. The September 11th attacks, alleged to have been committed by 19 individuals from Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, and Lebanon. None of those countries is on the list. And when you look at other examples, right down the line, Richard Reed, the shoe bomber, he came from Britain, wouldn't have been affected. The underwear bomber from Nigeria, not on the list. And, of course, I have my doubts about many of these cases, but these are what are out there on the public record. And Trump is protecting us from a non-existent threat. Now, certainly, there is always some potential that somebody can bypass the security regimes and can pull off another airline incident. But putting locks on the cockpit doors really made the biggest difference compared to any of this bullshit of the metal detectors and the security procedures at the airport. And now, identifying everyone who's non-American as a potential threat? That creates so much work for the security people that they're going to miss some actual attempted act of terrorism. So of the 24 attacks that the Post examined, only 2 might have been prevented had the perpetrator been subject to the full travel ban that Trump has proposed. Now, one of those would have to have been rejected when he was 2 years old. And no, that's 0 deaths would have been prevented. And yesterday I heard a chirpy reporter on my local all-news radio station saying that these new announced security measures are going to improve safety in air travel. Well, that suggests that it's all unsafe right now. And that, as we know, is simply not true. I want to congratulate Bob Perry. Robert Perry, the longtime Washington-based journalist, who is the founder and editor of Consortium News. He's been a frequent contributor to this program. He is the most respected skeptic of the whole Trump-Russia narrative and many other issues. And he has just been awarded the 2017 Martha Gellhorn Prize for Journalism. He received it Tuesday night at an event in London. It was presented by John Pilger, who was a friend of Martha Gellhorn, Gellhorn, who died a few years ago, and she was a real long-time, intrepid, and true journalist. And Pilger noted that Bob Perry started Consortium News back in 1995, and he said what he does is make sense of the news, why Saudi Arabia should be held accountable, why the invasion of Libya was a folly and a crime, why the New York Times is an apologist for a great power, why Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump have much in common, why Russia is not our enemy, why history is critical to understanding. Bob, congratulations. And Perry has a post today that is delightful for me because he found the way that the New York Times has quietly corrected an error that it has been committing for some time. And it's based on Hillary Clinton's claim last October in the final debate when she said 17 intelligence agencies have signed off on the theory that Russia was trying to, in fact, that Russia had hacked the DNC and handed off that material to WikiLeaks. And the Times repeated that error on June 25th in an article called White House Memo, written by Maggie Haberman. Haberman mocked Trump for still refusing to acknowledge a basic fact agreed upon by all 17 American intelligence agencies that he now oversees, Russia orchestrated the attacks and did it to help him get elected. Well, we know that it wasn't 17 agencies. I've been skeptical of that from the get-go, and I keep invoking the Coast Guard. That's one of the 17 agencies under the Director of National Intelligence. The Coast Guard did not get involved in the Trump-Russia investigation in any way, shape, or form. And we've got John Brennan and the former National Security Director, James Clapper, both of whom are proven liars, but they have testified that it was only 3 agencies, maybe 4 if you account for the Director of National Intelligence kind of supervising the work that was conducted last fall. And many people say, well, this is not that important. But it is important because it creates the illusion that the entire intelligence community believes the claims that are supported by zero public proof and advanced by anonymous leakers with strong connections to the intelligence community. So, Bob, you're doing a great job, and I'm glad to see you find that correction that was buried deep in the New York Times. Another story that Bob Perry has given great skeptical coverage to at Consortium News is the allegations from Trump and others that it was Syria that dropped a chemical weapon or used sarin in Khan Shaykhun, Syria, on April 4th of this year. And we've talked about Seymour Hersh's important article that was published by the German outlet Die Welt over the weekend. And I want to thank a listener. I won't identify him because I want to protect his privacy. But he sent me a link to another article that was published in Die Welt, and it's headlined, "We Got a Fucking Problem." Now, they said that they provided this recorded conversation, or it appears to be a text-based chat, between a security advisor and an active U.S.-American soldier on duty. Now, I can't verify that this is the source of the information that I'm about to share with you, but I can say that this is quite compelling, and it appears to be real. So the soldier says, "We got a fucking problem." The advisor, "What happened? Is it Trump ignoring the intel and going to try to hit the Syrians?" And then the advisor says in next quote here, "You may not have seen Trump's press conference yesterday. He's bought into the media story without asking to see the intel. We're likely to get our asses kicked by the Russians. Fucking dangerous. Where are the goddamn adults? The failure of the chain of command to tell the president the truth, whether he wants to hear it or not, will go down in history as one of our worst moments." American soldier, "I don't know. None of this makes any sense. We know there was no chemical attack. The Syrians struck a weapons cache, a legitimate military target, and there was collateral damage. That's it. They did not conduct any sort of chemical attack." So I've linked to this so you can read it and evaluate it for yourselves. There's more in the exchange, but I think you have the gist of it. I'm also linking to an interview with Seymour Hersh that's worth reading, published by Alternet today, and it gives you more details on the background of his article and the information that he has shared with us. Every day I like to stop for a second and thank the people who support my work here at the Peter B. Collins Podcast with your subscriptions. And today we'll mention Tim McKay, annual subscriber Coralie Jones, just renewed. Thank you, Coralie. Wendy Gebauer and Cynthia Von Hendricks have been longtime monthly supporters. I invite you to join in. Come on over to peterbcollins.com. Click on the menu button, pull it down, click on Become a Subscriber, and that takes you to the sign-up page where you can choose the level of support that you're comfortable with. Iraq has recaptured the iconic Al-Nuri Mosque in Mosul, but it's really just a pile of rubble. Nevertheless, Prime Minister Abadi is claiming that the end is near and that the Iraqi forces will retake control and end the occupation by the Islamic State of Mosul, where they've been since 2014. So I'm hesitant to predict that this is really the beginning of the end, but that's what they're telling us, and I'm sharing that with you. The worldwide computer problems caused by NSA-produced malware are mounting, and the pressure on the NSA to fess up to its own involvement and to try to do something about it is building. And California Congressman Ted Lieu, a Democrat from Los Angeles, a former Air Force officer, he is urging the NSA to help stop the attacks and stop hoarding knowledge of the computer vulnerabilities on which these weapons rely. They're focused on Windows-based computers, and the effort was to blame North Korea for the first wave of the WannaCry attacks, but we don't really know that. We do know that the malware being deployed came from the NSA and was given away by the shadow brokers, whoever they are. And so the damage is growing, and the NSA really needs to deal with it and stop hiding behind their security blankets over there at Fort Meade. The drug giant here in the United States, Merck, is now a victim. The Danish shipping company Maersk, Rosneft, the Russian state oil company, and also a subsidiary of FedEx in Memphis was hacked to the point that FedEx had to stop trading their stock. I don't know how much I want to delve into this latest tweet attack from Donald Trump on Mika Brzezinski, the co-anchor with Joe Scarborough of a morning show on MSDNC. Now, what Trump has done is really disgusting. There's no question about it. He says low IQ, crazy Mika, along with Psycho Joe, they demanded to come to Mar-a-Lago for the New Year's Eve celebration. And then he added this gratuitous hit that Mika at Mar-a-Lago was bleeding badly from a facelift. Now, it is disgusting that Trump would single them out for this kind of abuse. But they asked for it. Now, Mika and Joe slavishly helped prop up Donald Trump and promote him during the primary process. They gave him so much free time, and there was a recording of the back channel, Trump on the phone saying to Mika, hey, what are we going to talk about next? And actually telling her not to bring up topics that he didn't want to talk about, and she agreed. So they've had this kind of incestuous relationship. And I don't know if it's true, but Trump says they begged him to let them come to Mar-a-Lago for the New Year's Eve weekend this past year, and he says that he invited them against his better judgment. And responding on an infantile basis to an infantile bully, Mika responded by posting a picture on Twitter of a box of Cheerios that contained the words, made for little hands. I really think they deserve each other, and that's all I have to say about it. A couple of quickies here. Trump has nominated Stephen Bradbury, who served at the Justice Department Office of Legal Counsel under George W. Bush. He came in and redrafted some of John Yo's torture memos to clean them up a little bit, sanitize them a little bit, but he nevertheless embraced the torture regime under Bush. And Tammy Duckworth, to her credit, offered this blistering comment, you lack the judgment to stand up and say what is morally right when pressured by the president, and I'm afraid you would do so again. Bradbury is nominated to be the counsel at the Transportation Department. It's good news from House subcommittees, where one after another is rejecting the proposed budget from the Trump White House. A couple of examples. The Food for Peace program was subject to elimination in the Trump budget, and it has been restored for $1.6 billion. Another subcommittee has restored $1.2 billion to a cut proposed for the Army Corps of Engineers, and so I hope that pattern continues. I'm a little surprised, frankly, because I would think that many of these Republicans would love to cut government so they can drown it in the bathtub, and this is how they plan to do it. Last night, the guy who said that he would pay for his own campaign last year held his first fundraiser for the 2020 campaign cycle. That would be the Trumpster. And, of course, ignoring any concerns about ethics, he held the fundraiser at the Trump International Hotel in Washington. Yes, greasing himself once again. There's a new report from a centrist Democratic group that has taken a look at the prospects of Democrats regaining control of the House next year. And it is a long shot. They need to pick up 24 seats. And there are 23 districts held by Republicans, but where Hillary Clinton won a majority last year. But when you analyze those districts, they're not likely to kick out the Republican. And so the interesting thing that I think is the bottom line, the most important takeaway, quote, is that there is no one kind of voter or district that can deliver the House for Democrats in 2018. It will be a local, district-by-district slog. And I think that's going to make it difficult for the Democrats to regain control. Back in 2016, I annoyed a number of my progressive listeners in the state of Oregon by covering the occupation of the Malheur Wildlife Refuge by the Bundy clan. And I continued the coverage when I raised issues about the roadblock killing of Lavoy Finicum, who was one of the gun-toting buddies of the Bundy gang. And while I did not support their occupation or the way they brandished guns and, threatened federal employees at the wildlife refuge, I also deplored the killing of Lavoy Finicum in this roadblock situation. And we also exposed that an FBI agent lied. His name is Joseph Astorita. And the FBI promised to investigate itself, and as usual, nothing happened. So a grand jury in Portland has returned a few charges of lying to the FBI by an FBI agent. Astorita knowingly and willfully made a false statement to a special agent when he said he did not fire his weapon. The misleading conduct and failure to disclose the fact that he had fired 2 rounds played a role in the FBI's decision not to call a shooting incident response team to investigate. But the grand jury has stepped up, and these were announced months after the surprise verdict in the Oregon militia federal trial, which went in favor of the protesters, if you recall. Authorities in 2 states are looking into the nonprofit scam artist and Trump defender Jay Sekulow. Josh Stein, Attorney General for North Carolina, and Eric Schneiderman, Attorney General of New York State, said they'll be examining the operations of Sekulow's group Christian Advocates Serving Evangelism and the Interlocking American Center for Law and Justice. The Sekulow family has received more than $60 million in compensation and contracts in the last 16 years, and that has raised the eyebrows. Also, The Guardian got a hold of the fundraising scripts that telemarketers use to squeeze money out of Christians, and it's just disgusting how greedy Jay Sekulow is. And finally today, this is sad. People know that if you get a viral video on YouTube, you can become famous, and if you insert ads, you could probably make some money. And so a young couple, Mona Lisa Perez, age 19, and Pedro Ruiz III, age 22, were staging a series of stunts that they captured on YouTube, and they were starting to build a following. And they decided to up the ante. And apparently Miss Perez didn't want to shoot the book that her boyfriend was holding, and she resisted. But he gave her a .50 caliber pistol and said, "Come on, shoot this book. I'll bet you the bullet will not penetrate the book." Well, it didn't penetrate the book. It ricocheted and killed Pedro Ruiz, who is the father of one child by Mona Lisa Perez, who is pregnant with a second. Thanks for joining me for my News and Comment podcast today. It is available on YouTube. I remain Peter B. Collins.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails.